Muladhara. The root chakra, known in Sanskrit as Muladhara, rests at the base of the spine near the perineum and marks the foundation of the human subtle body. Traditional yogic texts describe this center as the seat of stability, survival, and grounding because it anchors prana into the physical form. Its color correspondence is deep red, symbolizing vitality and the earth element, while its bija or seed sound is the mantra Lam, resonating at a low frequency that steadies the nervous system. In practice, chanting this syllable activates vibration in the pelvic floor and signals to the mind that safety and support exist in the body itself. The Shat Chakra Nirupana, a 1577 CE tantric text by Purnananda Swami, provides one of the earliest detailed mappings of Muladhara's symbolic lotus of 4 petals. Each petal represents specific vriddhis or mental tendencies linked to human survival instincts such as fear and attachment. Because this chakra governs basic needs food, shelter, and security imbalances here manifest as instability and anxiety that ripple through every other energy center. Yogic teachers therefore insist that Muladhara must be purified and balanced before higher spiritual practices unfold. Without such grounding, fear dominates and blocks the ascent of Kundalini energy, setting the stage for deeper blockages explored in the next section on Earth Connection. Earth Connection. The Muladhara chakra is traditionally depicted as a 4-petaled lotus, each petal representing one of the fundamental instincts that anchor human life to survival and continuity. This lotus rests upon the Prithvi Tattva, the principle of earth, which ties Muladhara directly to the body's densest structures, feet, legs, and bones. Because these are the parts that literally hold a person upright, yogic texts describe their strength as a reflection of root stability. When this chakra is balanced, the body feels heavy in the best sense, grounded, firm, and present in the here and now. A yogi's balance begins in the soles of the feet. Across rural traditions, farmers and ascetics alike emphasized rituals of returning energy to the soil, from walking barefoot on the ground to offering food or flowers directly to Bhumi Devi, the earth goddess. These acts symbolized a cycle of giving and receiving that affirmed spiritual security, because losing connection to land meant losing both livelihood and identity. Modern psychology mirrors this insight, showing that displacement and uprootedness often trigger the same anxiety yogis once described as a blocked root chakra. Therefore, whenever Muladhara weakens, the body and psyche both reflect the absence of ground. This prepares the way to understand how such disconnection transforms into blockages that manifest as fear and instability. Blockages. When the Muladhara chakra becomes obstructed, its grounding energy turns unstable and generates chronic fear, insecurity, and persistent anxiety. Because this center governs survival instincts, the nervous system reacts as if safety is constantly under threat, even in environments that pose no real danger. Yogic commentaries describe such imbalance as a misdirection of prana, where life force becomes trapped in a cycle of vigilance and unease. This explains why individuals with a blocked root often feel restless, unable to sit still, or perpetually braced for impact. The body reads danger even when the mind cannot name it. Blockages also manifest through excessive material attachment, hoarding, or obsession with possessions, since the unconscious belief arises that objects can substitute for security. Psychological trauma, especially abandonment or loss in formative years, is recorded deep in Muladhara and resurfaces as either repression of primal instincts or an overcompensation through rigid control. Physical posture often reflects this state: tight hips, tense lower back, and a body that resists grounding into the earth. Because these blockages prevent energy from circulating upward, higher chakras cannot stabilize, and the imbalance magnifies over time. This continual restlessness leads directly into the next layer of Muladhara dysfunction, the grip of primal fear. Primal fear. Fear sits at the core of Muladhara imbalance because the chakra governs the body's most primitive survival instincts. When this center is blocked, the fight-or-flight response overactivates, flooding the nervous system with signals of threat even in safe environments. Neuroscience describes this as the ancient survival brain hijacking normal energy flow, while yogic texts identify it as prana trapped in the lowest center. The physical body often responds with shivering, freezing, or sudden panic states that mirror a constant readiness for danger. In Muladhara, fear is not just an emotion, it is an energetic command. The Rig Veda, one of the oldest Sanskrit collections of hymns, describes fear as a binding force that restrains life from flowing freely. Because fear locks prana circulation at the base of the spine, higher centers like anahata or ajna cannot receive balanced energy. This explains why practitioners who carry unresolved primal fear often struggle to meditate or feel inner peace, since their foundation continually collapses beneath them. Yogic teachers therefore ask the reflective question, how much of your daily choices are directed by fear rather than trust? Understanding this sets the stage for examining how childhood experiences first. Childhood roots. The first 7 years of life are regarded as the formative period for Muladhara, because the child's nervous system learns to associate the world with either safety or a threat. Yogic tradition emphasizes that early experiences of nourishment, warmth, and stability provide the foundation for a balanced root chakra, just as securely built walls protect a temple. When those needs are unmet through neglect, instability, or violence, the Muladhara contracts, imprinting fear and insecurity into the subtle body. This explains why adults often feel blocked at the root when childhood trust was broken, even decades later. The body remembers safety, or the lack of it, long before the mind can articulate it. Modern attachment theory mirrors this yogic insight by showing that insecure bonds with caregivers shape lifelong patterns of anxiety and avoidance. The same principle appears in tantric philosophy, where the family is seen as the energetic soil from which the child's root chakra grows. If that soil is unstable, the adult must later rebuild safety through conscious healing practices rather than relying on what was absent. Yogis developed rituals, breathwork, and grounding exercises specifically to restore what early trauma denied. This intersection of psychology and yoga leads directly into the visible physical consequences, where blocked roots express themselves through body symptoms. Body symptoms. Blocked energy in Muladhara rarely stays confined to the subtle body. It manifests through concrete, physical symptoms that signal imbalance. Constipation, lower back pain, and chronic tightness in the hips often reveal that grounding energy is not flowing freely through the base of the spine. Because this chakra governs legs, feet, and bones, weakness in the lower limbs or circulation problems frequently accompany the blockage. Even the teeth and skeletal system, both tied to earth element stability, may carry tension or decay when root energy remains unstable. The body speaks the root chakra's language through pain and rigidity. Ayurveda explains this pattern as an aggravation of vata dosha, the bioenergy of air and movement, which disrupts when earth principle is weakened. Therefore, autoimmune flare-ups and nervous system disorders often appear alongside Muladhara imbalance, because the body loses its stable base of immunity and resilience. Traditional healers viewed such conditions not merely as medical issues, but as signs that survival energy was trapped or misdirected. Pain in this sense becomes a diagnostic tool, pointing to what the psyche resists grounding into. These body signals make it clear why yogic texts insisted that without stabilizing the root, the higher chakras cannot flourish, leading directly to the restrained potential of Kundalini energy. Kundalini restrained. Kundalini, described as a coiled serpent resting within Muladhara, is said to hold the latent potential of spiritual awakening. In yogic texts, this energy lies dormant until the foundation of the root chakra is stable enough to channel its rise. Teachers warn that when Muladhara is blocked or unsteady, the ascent of Kundalini through the Sushumna Nadi becomes dangerous rather than liberating. Swami Sivananda, one of the 20th century's most influential yoga masters, emphasized that the root must be firm before higher practices are attempted. Without a stable ground, awakening turns chaotic instead of transcendent. Accounts from both classical tantra and modern practitioners confirm that premature or sudden awakenings can lead to psychological breakdowns, hallucinations, or even psychosis, because the nervous system becomes overwhelmed by the surge of prana. Ancient manuals such as the Hatha Yoga Pradipika therefore caution against forcing Kundalini through extreme austerities or unprepared rituals. The temptation of extraordinary power, visions, and heightened states often draws seekers to rush this process. But the price is imbalance at every level of body and mind. For this reason, yogis insist on disciplined grounding practices before Kundalini is even approached. The stability of Muladhara not only contains the serpent's power, but also prepares the way for its safe release through sound, beginning with the vibration of the Lam chant. Lam chant. The bija mantra of the root chakra is Lam, a single syllable whose vibration directly resonates with the pelvic floor. Yogic teachers describe its sound as a subtle tuning fork that clears stagnant energy lodged at the base of the spine. Repetition of this chant generates low-frequency resonance, which ancient seers associated with the deep red frequency of Muladhara. Because the root is linked to survival, the mantra operates like a stabilizing code, calming fear and anchoring awareness into the body. Sound becomes the surgeon's tool where hands cannot reach. Historical accounts note that monks often performed the lamb chant in caves or stone chambers, environments that amplified the vibration until the body itself trembled. Practitioners reported sensations of warmth, heat rising through the hips, or subtle shaking as prana loosened from constricted channels. These effects were not seen as side phenomena, but as proof that the mantra was piercing layers of fear and releasing blocked energy. By clearing the foundation through sound, the body became prepared for deeper practices of posture and gesture. This natural progression links the power of vibration to the physical grounding offered by mudras and asanas. Mudras and asanas. The physical practices linked to Muladhara emphasize grounding because the body itself becomes the doorway to stabilizing root energy. The traditional Muladhara mudra directs both palms downward toward the earth, symbolizing surrender of fear and conscious rooting into stability. Yogis describe this gesture as more than symbolic. When the hands orient toward the ground, the nervous system unconsciously mirrors the act of anchoring. The gesture aligns subtle intention with physical posture, reminding the body that security exists in contact with the earth. Even a simple hand position can shift an entire energetic state. Asana practice further reinforces the same principle through postures that activate the base of the spine and the feet. Mountain pose, standing with firm weight through the heels, awakens awareness of the skeletal system as a living pillar. Squat postures, especially Malasana, compress and energize the pelvic floor, stimulating pranic flow through Muladhara. Warrior poses root the practitioner through strong legs, while simultaneously training balance and steadiness in the mind. Yogic teachers note that pressure on the heels in these postures channels energy directly into the root, teaching stability by embodiment rather than theory. Because small adjustments in posture often unlock deep energetic releases, these asanas prepare the practitioner for the ritual dimension of Muladhara explored in tantric practices. Tantric rituals. Tantric traditions approach Muladhara through direct engagement with the raw forces of earth and survival. Rituals frequently employed red flowers, roots, and seeds as offerings, each symbol chosen for its connection to vitality and grounding. Villages often marked their boundaries with fire pits or earthen altars, where offerings were made to Bhumi Devi, the earth goddess, to secure stability for crops and community life. Mantras resonating with the Bija sound of Muladhara were chanted during full moons, amplifying the sense of cyclical renewal and anchoring collective energy to the soil. These practices remind us that spiritual security once meant literal survival on the land. Certain Shakta traditions carried these rituals into darker territory, where blood sacrifices symbolized the ultimate exchange between human life and Earth's fertility. While unsettling to modern sensibilities, these rites reflected an uncompromising understanding that Muladhara governs both birth and death, survival and surrender. Such acts were intended to shock the participant into confronting primal fear and attachment, clearing the root through intensity rather than gentleness. Ancient texts note that without ritual grounding, higher tantric practices risked imbalance because the foundation of stability had not yet been secured. From these raw practices emerges the recognition that external symbols of earth eventually evolve into subtler supports, such as the grounding qualities attributed to gemstones. Gemstones. Across yogic and tantric traditions, gemstones were considered practical supports for Muladhara because their weight and density mirrored the grounding qualities of the earth element. Garnet, hematite, and red jasper were most frequently used not only for their deep hues resonating with the chakra's red frequency, but also for their perceived ability to anchor unstable energy. Practitioners often carried these stones in amulets or placed them at the base of altars to strengthen connection to survival energy. The heaviness of such minerals was thought to pull the aura downward, settling scattered prana into the root. A stone in the pocket was treated as a medicine for fear. In rural communities, crystals were sometimes buried directly into farmland, a ritual gesture intended to secure fertility and protection of crops by grounding human energy into the soil. Astrological correspondences also played a role, with Muladhara linked to the planetary force of Mars, whose influence was considered both protective and volatile. Stones resonating with Mars were thought to stabilize its aggression, transforming raw survival instincts into steady vitality. This symbolic layering raises the question, do stones simply reflect human projection, or do they carry memory of fear and strength within their crystalline structure? However one answers, the use of gemstones demonstrates the human need for tangible anchors, a theme that becomes even more complex when considering ancestral memory woven into Muladhara. Ancestral memory. Muladhara is often described as the chakra that stores karmic imprints, a deep vault where not only individual fears but also collective lineage memories are held. Yogic philosophy teaches that unresolved traumas within families, whether loss, violence, or displacement, can imprint themselves in the root, shaping survival instincts across generations. Modern science parallels this view through epigenetics, showing how stressors such as famine or war leave chemical marks on DNA that influence descendants' responses to danger. This is why Muladhara blockages often feel heavier than personal memory alone. They are echoes of ancestral struggle reverberating in the body. Fear sometimes belongs less to the present than to the bloodline itself. Across indigenous cultures, rituals to honor ancestors often centered on fire, earth, and rhythmic movement, elements closely tied to root chakra symbolism. Fire dances at burial grounds, offerings of food to the dead, or seasonal ceremonies ensured that the living remained in balance with ancestral presence. These practices acknowledge that survival was never individual but woven through the continuity of lineage. In yogic terms, honoring the root meant acknowledging that karmic and genetic inheritance shape the foundation of one's stability. From this recognition arises the question of release. How can ancestral imprints be purified so the root carries strength rather than fear? This inquiry naturally leads into yogic practices designed to transmute stored impressions through breath, mantra, and ritual discipline. Wealth and security. Root chakra blockages often manifest as chronic money struggles because Muladhara governs the instinct to secure shelter, food, and material stability. Fear of scarcity mirrors energetic constriction at this level, producing anxiety around finances and survival. In traditional tantric teachings, wealth was never viewed as separate from energy. It was considered an extension of prana, the life force itself. Therefore, when the root is balanced, financial flow is experienced less as accumulation and more as sustainable nourishment. Scarcity in thought often precedes scarcity in form. Vedic traditions link prosperity to Lakshmi, goddess of abundance, who is invoked not for luxury but for stability, fertility, and the ability to thrive. Texts emphasize that hoarding wealth paradoxically worsens root imbalances because energy becomes stagnant rather than circulating. This dynamic reflects the survival abundance paradox. Clinging arises from fear, but release allows greater security. Yogic philosophy therefore teaches that generosity and grounding practices free the Muladhara, shifting one from fear-driven survival into steady abundance. From here, the path naturally unfolds toward exploring how community and relationship further support or destabilize the root chakra's foundation. Yoga Sutras. Patanjali, compiler of the Yoga Sutras around 400 CE, identifies abhinavesha, fear of death, as one of the 5 primal kleshas, or afflictions that bind human consciousness. This clinging to life arises instinctively, even in the wise, and reveals the Muladhara chakra's deep tie to mortality. Because the root governs survival, it becomes the energetic seat where death anxiety resides, often surfacing as panic, restlessness, or compulsive security seeking. Yogic psychology therefore considers the fear of death not as weakness, but as the most ingrained obstacle to liberation. At the root, survival clings hardest to form. Traditional yogis confronted this fear directly, often meditating in cremation grounds where the impermanence of the body was unavoidable. Skulls, bones, and fire pits became tools of contemplation, stripping away denial and exposing the raw truth of mortality. By placing awareness in Muladhara during such practices, they trained the nervous system to remain steady even while facing death. This radical exposure dissolved blockages, allowing the root chakra to hold not fear but unshakable grounding. From here, the teachings suggest one can rise to higher chakras without being pulled back by survival's most primal shadow. Silence practice. Sitting directly on bare earth is one of the oldest methods for harmonizing the Muladhara chakra, because soil itself carries stabilizing electromagnetic charge. In silence, the body begins to attune not to external noise but to internal rhythms, most notably the slow throb of the heartbeat. This awareness roots attention downward, synchronizing physiology with the steady pulse of the planet. Modern research even confirms that contact with soil microbes can modulate mood, suggesting a biological foundation for the ancient intuition that Earth heals. The ground is not passive, it actively speaks through sensation. Yogis and shamans alike sought silence in forests, caves, and burial grounds, not only to escape distraction but to reveal the subconscious fears held at the root. Stillness strips away layers of performance, leaving only the raw confrontation with survival anxieties. In Himalayan tradition, practitioners who meditated in caves for months reported that silence amplified every hidden tension before dissolving it. Because Muladhara governs instinctual fear, silence itself becomes the crucible where these blockages surface, tremble, and eventually loosen their grip. From this stripped foundation, the path of sound through mantra and vibration naturally emerges as the next layer of root chakra awakening. Collective root. The Muladhara chakra does not exist only in individuals. Entire nations display its blockages through history. Colonization uprooted indigenous peoples from ancestral lands, severing their grounding ties to soil, river, and sacred geography. Mass migrations caused by famine, war, or forced displacement compounded this rupture, leaving generations unable to fully root in place. When large populations lose connection to land, instability manifests as collective anxiety, fractured identity, and weakened cultural continuity. What the root represents in one body, history magnifies across millions. Ecological destruction also mirrors the same instability, because stripping forests, rivers, and soil reflects a civilization acting from fear of scarcity. Tribal wars and border conflicts often arise from survival insecurity, echoing the primal anxieties lodged in Muladhara. Yogic and shamanic traditions insist that collective healing demands grounding rituals, whether through earth offerings, seasonal festivals, or the preservation of sacred sites. By consciously repairing the root on a cultural scale, societies reestablish balance with both land and lineage. This recognition naturally leads toward exploring how individual grounding practices can ripple outward into planetary healing. Dark blockages. When the Muladhara chakra is deeply obstructed, its energy often twists into violence, domination, and destructive addiction. Instead of grounding life force, the root collapses into bloodlust, reflecting its shadow nature. Fear, which normally alerts the body to danger, mutates into aggression and the urge to control others. Texts on left-hand or black tantra traditions warned of this imbalance, describing how practitioners who distorted root energies risked falling into obsession with power. Here, survival no longer protects life, it consumes it. Addiction also signals a root chakra driven entirely into survival mode, where the body seeks compulsive stimulation to mask the terror of instability. In this state, Muladhara no longer anchors balance, but becomes a vortex that drains higher energy centers, preventing spiritual growth. Ancient yogis describe this as dark roots producing dangerous outcomes, because unchecked primal fear undermines compassion, community, and higher awareness. Recognizing these distortions allows practitioners to distinguish between healthy grounding and destructive entanglement, which naturally prepares the way for practices of purification and redirection. Healing journey. Healing the Muladhara chakra unfolds through breath, earth contact, and steady repetition, never through sudden shortcuts or forced awakenings. Yogic traditions emphasize pranayama as the first medicine, because controlled breath calms the nervous system and reestablishes trust in the body. Sitting on the bare ground allows the subtle energies of soil and stone to stabilize scattered vitality, while mantric repetition anchors awareness and safety. The body learns again that the earth holds rather than threatens. This journey is always gradual because trust broken by fear or trauma can only be restored step by step. Tantric texts stress that guru guidance is essential, since teachers hold the lineage of tested methods and prevent seekers from mistaking agitation for progress. The root chakra must be treated not as a prison of survival fears, but as a doorway that, when purified, opens upward to the higher centers. Without the patient healing of Muladhara, ascent into creativity, vision, and liberation remains unstable, because every higher practice depends upon the strength of the foundation. Final ascent. The Muladhara chakra stabilizes the entire subtle system, acting as the sacred threshold through which all higher awakenings must pass. Without balance at the root, energy rising through the sushumna becomes distorted, because instability at the base magnifies at every higher stage. Yogic traditions often describe the root as the lotus that must first bloom before its stem can rise toward the sun of consciousness. The journey is not upward escape, but deep rooting that allows upward growth. This foundation determines every future awakening, since the clarity of vision in ajna or the bliss of sahasrara cannot remain steady on fractured ground. Blockages at the root are not curses, but teachers, drawing attention to unhealed fears and unresolved survival struggles that demand transformation. The yogi who dares to face these blockages finds that fear dissolves into strength and scarcity into sufficiency. The question remains for every seeker. Will you face your root or allow the foundation of awakening to remain unfinished as you attempt ascent?